This is Press Pit with Laura Allen.
Hello and welcome to the programme. For the next 60 minutes we'll look at the stories making the pages in our local newspapers, we'll look at the biggest Cardiff stories in depth, see what's making the nationals, plus the best of the web. Granted access to Press Pit today are Professor of Journalism from Cardiff University Karen Wall-Jorgensen and John Antoniazzi, Policy Manager at Tenevis Cancer Care. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
First, let's take a look at Cardiff's news so far this week in 90 seconds. A pioneering enterprise putting Cardiff on the map. Cardiff University receives EU funding for energy research.
It's about creating new ways in which we can break new ground in terms of energy. It's about, obviously, the technology that's needed to ensure that Wales is at the forefront of creating this energy ability.
Cardiff's school system is to see big changes with £50 million of Welsh Government and council funds being prioritised to improve education.
What we're absolutely determined to make sure is that disadvantage doesn't haunt children for through their education.
And the mother of a teenager who was murdered at a caravan park says she's found comfort in donating his organs. Connor Marshall's mum made the decision to donate after seeing a tattoo on her son's arm saying life goes on. Heavy police presence as activists protest against an arms fair at the Motorpoint Arena and an alternative to university. More and more people are taking up apprenticeships in Cardiff to avoid the debt of further education.
I wasn't really sure where to start. It's difficult going in as a graduate. Didn't want to do a degree and then find out that wasn't what I wanted to do. It gave me the opportunity to broaden my horizons, come into a massive firm, wealth of opportunity, and then decide the actual exact path I want to take at a later date.
So those are just some of the stories we've covered so far this week, and let's go straight to Karen. You're kicking us off with an education story this week.
Yes, that's right. This is the front page story in the New Day, which is the latest addition to the newspaper scene, and the headline is "The Great British School Shake-Up." Mm-hmm. And it's basically about Osborne's plans, the government's plans in England to turn all primaries and secondaries into academies. And this is already something that's been a political priority for the Conservatives for a number of years. It was actually, I believe, started under Tony Blair's government. And this policy is actually going to lead to the sort of creeping privatization of education in England as local authorities lose control over the education system, as there is a complete decline of the national curriculum as well. And what's interesting here is that this is something that is being very strongly resisted in Wales. So in Wales there are no plans to go down this route of the academies, and there's a strong attachment to the state school system, which I think is a very positive thing, because I think there's a huge danger here in terms of privatization and in terms of how that is going to exacerbate existing inequalities between pupils from wealthier backgrounds and those from poorer backgrounds.
And you're from an education background yourself in a university. What really is the difference between comprehensives and academies for people that don't really know?
Well, the difference is that the control over the education is taken away from the local councils, and it's put into the hands of these academies, which are privately run, but they do get funding from the government. And what that means is that these academies take control over the curriculum, and they take control over things including the contracts of teachers and also the pay of teachers. So that obviously is a huge threat to the teachers' union. It's also a threat to the idea of equality in education and to the idea that all children from all different backgrounds are exposed to the same knowledge and they have access to the same curriculum. And so for me, it's a huge problem in terms of inequality, but it's also an indication of where the government has been taking us in terms of the privatization of education in general. And both in England and in Wales, we've also seen huge cuts in direct funding to higher education. Yeah. So this sort of creeping privatization is something that is not only taking place across schools but also in a university setting. And so it's something that I think everyone who's a parent, a grandparent, but also currently a pupil, a student, should really be concerned about.
And obviously, John, here in Wales, they've got the 50 million that they've just, the local council, Welsh Government, are pumping into education now. Is this, you mentioned obviously, Karen, that they're resisting it slightly, but this is the state that's putting this into Wales. So is it different here, do you think?
I think what we're seeing now is just this huge ideological chasm which is opening up between Wales and England. I mean, we've seen it in many respects when it's come to the health system. We've had a health minister in Wales that has actively rejected market forces, which is completely the opposite to what we're seeing in England. And really, this chasm has opened up quite dramatically with this, and what we're getting now is actually full-fat Tory. We had Diet Coke Tory under the last government, and this is really them pursuing uninhibited ideological agenda here. So, I mean, it's fascinating to watch, but again, and perhaps it sits with my politics slightly as well, that I think that there needs to be some degree of regional control over schools and consistency in terms of how curriculums are set, and for me it's a real it's quite nerve-wracking to see it unfold.
And obviously we've got the elections coming up, the Assembly elections. Is this something that's going to be high on the agenda? Do you think there's a chance of this privatisation creeping in Wales?
Obviously, it would completely depend on the election outcome. But after May the 5th, we're looking at a Welsh Labour Party which is likely to be brokering coalition deals. But I wouldn't imagine it being at the top of the agenda. We've got a very kind of strong ideological position in Wales, so I don't see us pushing off in that direction. We're likely to have some form of Labour government again.
Thanks, guys. That's great. Both great points. And moving on now to the sexism on the sofa story, which is on page 3 of the Daily Mail, which is what you've got over there, Karen. Now, they're saying that because they've just hired someone for BBC Breakfast, a man, and he's on the left of the sofa, and they're saying traditionally that men are always on the left, and this is maybe a sexism concern. Is it sexism or just silly?
Well, I mean, I think that obviously there's some evidence to suggest that the eye is drawn to the left side of the screen, and so that's the part you see the first. And what the story states is that it's typically the more senior presenter who is placed in what is perceived to be this more favorable position. And I think for me that's really the more significant concern here regarding sexism, that the male presenter is usually the more senior one. And so you do see, generally speaking, a predominance of male senior presenters, and you also often see a development where when female presenters get to a certain age, let's say past their mid-40s or so, they sort of gradually disappear off our screens. So there's this perception that if you're a bloke, it's fine if you're sort of getting a bit wrinkly and grey. If you're kind of a little bit of a silver fox, perhaps, that's perfectly fine. But if you are a woman, as soon as the wrinkles appear, you disappear off the screen. And that, to me, is a more significant concern here.
So it is less about the sexism, more about perhaps that there's an inequality, a complete inequality between the two, not just is it better for one to be in one place and one to be in the other. You mentioned silver fox. Obviously, we've got Philip Schofield on this morning, who's a famous silver fox. But is this really that big of an issue, or are we worrying too much about sexism now? John, what do you think?
Well, I mean, I don't think our breakfast couches across the country are exactly the bastions of diversity, and I think it's quite a valid concern to raise, particularly with this new appointment. This is going to be a staple. This is staple viewing for the entire nation on apart from Made in Cardiff TV, obviously. But this is what millions of people will be tuning into every day, and I think that's it is a very real concern, and until our news teams and breakfast sofas start actually reflecting the diversity of our society, we've got quite a long way to go.
Yeah, and do you think this is an ongoing problem, or do you think things like this will highlight it and maybe create some change?
Well, I think it's an ongoing problem, and I think that some broadcasters have made significant steps to actually address it. So if we look at something like Channel 4 News, for example, they have been very deliberate in terms of pursuing a more diverse cast of characters, if you will, on the screens. But this is by no means over. As John rightly pointed out, there are significant issues of diversity, and so anything that calls attention to that is very welcome. I'm not so sure that the distinction about whether someone's sitting on the left or the right really has to do with the more substantive problems here.
Thank you very much, Karen and John. We're just going to take a short break now, and you'll have more from Pressbit and my two guests in a few minutes' time. We'll be back shortly. Hi and welcome back to Pressbit. With me tonight are Karen Wall-Jorgensen, Professor of Journalism at Cardiff University, and John Antoniazzi from Tenebris Cancer Charity. Topping the agenda this week has been the future of our nation. Wales is the first country in Europe to look at passing a law to safeguard the future of our children and grandchildren. There was a big conference held in Cardiff on the issue, and our reporter Rosalie Miller has this.
Today, the new Future Generations Commissioner is welcoming in a law to safeguard the future of Wales.
Well, what we're doing is looking back over the journey in sustainable development over the last decade or so, and just a couple of weeks, in just a couple of weeks' time, the new Act, the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act, is coming into force. That will mean that all of our public bodies in Wales have to adopt new ways of working, and that the whole of Wales are working towards a set of common goals, a vision for Wales, both now and into the future, a vision of the Wales that we want for our children and our grandchildren.
There are many goals being set today, including Wales becoming a more globally responsible community.
The Wellbeing of Future Generations Act is all about safeguarding the future. It's about making sure we make decisions today that take into account the needs of future generations. I think at the heart of that is how we make sure that climate change is managed, because that's probably the biggest issue as far as future generations are concerned. So we've got to make moves today towards a low carbon economy, how we build more renewable energy capacity in Wales, how we create jobs and opportunities that are low carbon jobs and opportunities. So that's very much at the heart of the agenda. But the Act provides a legal framework for the whole of the public sector in Wales. So every public body in Wales will have a responsibility under this Act to take into account the well-being of future generations.
The new law focuses on long-term solutions and will be in action in a few weeks' time.
Okay, so we are moving on to our next topic now of the evening. We've got a big question now about safeguarding the future of our nation, as we mentioned in the video earlier. So, John, I know you've got a bit about this. Is this something we need to be worrying about now, or, you know, do we have time to worry about this right now?
Well, it's absolutely essential that we're taking a longer-term view about, you know, the health of our nation, the sustainability of it, even how we feed ourselves as well. And it's something, you know, I work for Tenebris Cancer Care, and one of the things that, you know, keeps us up at night is the fact that, you know, it's not just, you know, it was 1 in 3 of us would be affected by cancer, now it's up to 1 in 2. And a lot of cancer diagnoses can be prevented by improving your lifestyles, so by quitting tobacco, by drinking less alcohol and things like that. And there's a lot of really positive things that we can do to improve outcomes. I mean, the thing that came out from the Future Generations Act, and, you know, it's been lauded as a world first and really seen as something which is groundbreaking, is the fact that it's really light on the delivery end. You know, that everything that the legislation says, and the Future Generations Commissioner Sophie Howe has outlined, is stuff that we can all agree with. It's just the fact that we're really going to have to see, you know, there's a lot of money being ploughed into this. It's creating a whole industry of public service boards to look at how local authorities take account of you know, the future and how they plan for health and well-being and cleaner communities. but at the same time, the actual delivery and the action behind it is questionable. So, I mean, I'm not going to lay into Sophie Howe too much at the moment because she's only just taken up her post as the Future Generations Commissioner.
Yeah.
But I mean, for me, you know, with the huge challenges, I mean, Wales actually has some of the, you know, the worst cancer survival rates. We've got some of the worst, you know, health outcomes. You know, one in 5 of the population still smoking. We've got some really complex issues that we need to tackle, and we need to be doing it now.
Yeah.
And one of my concerns is that it's been a lot of talk and light on the action and delivery.
Okay, thanks, John. Moving on now to the baby boom story, which is on the front page of the Daily Express, with big concerns across the UK that we're seeing a big birth rate, higher and higher numbers of population. This is an issue potentially in the future for Wales with the increase in the numbers with the city deal, all these new things that are coming to Cardiff. We're seeing bigger and bigger population numbers coming to the city with big projections in the next couple of years. So do you think this is something we need to worry about, or are we kind of making the way for these new population increases? Karen?
Well, I think that it's very clear, certainly, that in Cardiff and in the city region, there is a significant plan for population growth. And the city and Wales actually both welcome this kind of population growth. So in some ways you could say, well, this is not a huge concern for Wales. On the other hand, of course, we also have to think about what kind of impact it's going to have on things like infrastructure and public services, and whether we're in a position to actually respond to those increasing needs. So I think that there are several different ways of looking at it, but certainly in terms of population growth, that's something that we in Cardiff have to get used to very much over the next few decades.
We're definitely becoming one of the fastest growing cities, especially for sports. We've seen huge numbers come to Cardiff. But surely this is all a good thing. Tourism, it boosts the economy. Surely it's all positive.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I see it as being a huge positive, and just improving the the kind of already diverse makeup of our city, and and it ties back with the discussion we were having earlier about future generations and the well-being of them. And one of the biggest challenges that we're going to have to overcome as well is things like housing conditions. How do we improve issues like that, because that deeply affects health, and there's going to be a lot of quite major challenges that our city is going to have to overcome before these huge population increases take place.
And I know from speaking to some political parties round Cardiff, they seem to have big concerns about transport in the city. Traffic is a huge concern, parking already an issue in Cardiff. Is this just going to be exacerbated by big numbers, or do you think Cardiff will be able to manage the increase?
Well, the big city region deal that I believe we're going to talk a little bit more about later as well is obviously very much focused on improving the infrastructure. I think that one area that needs to be looked at very seriously is how to promote sustainable transportation. I travel around on a bike everywhere, and it's extremely difficult to get around Cardiff on a bicycle, even as we've seen huge increases in the number of people taking trips by bike. By some measures, 10% of all trips in Cardiff take place on a bicycle, but the infrastructure isn't there. And obviously this is one of the big areas that needs to be addressed.
Okay, great. And moving on to our next story now, we've got the selfie payment idea, which is on in the Sun, page 2021, which you've got in front of you there, John. So the idea behind this is that saying, in a way to prevent fraud, companies like Amazon are suggesting that people will use selfies as a payment kind of idea. Is this kind of an obsession with a selfie now? Are we seeing too much of selfies in the media, or is this a legitimate way of doing it, do you think?
I think it has a very important role in terms of biometric security. We're actually seeing more and more computers. I mean, Microsoft have developed a facial recognition service for logging into to your computer through your webcam, and even Sony with their PlayStation 4 and the app that they've developed has facial recognition for signing in additional accounts. So it's it has an interesting role to play in terms of protecting your identity and your safety online, and obviously all of your finances and things. So I see it as being something that's going to happen more and more. We've seen with the Apple iPhone 6s and the models on from that they're now taking thumbprints. And it's all a move towards making sure that our data and our and basically preventing us from being taken advantage of by criminals.
And so, Karen, cybercrime, I mean, this is clearly an issue to create something like this. Is it something you worry about on a daily basis, or do you think this is something, that doesn't really affect maybe everyday people that much?
Well, I think that technologies can be used for good and evil purposes, and I think that if you can improve security by using selfies to actually make payments and do them more securely, that's a great thing. I think that one of the areas of concern about this growth of technology in terms of mediating all of our interactions is how is that data going to be used? Who's going to have access to it? Are the intelligence services going to be looking at all of our selfies? Are they going to be able to link that with other data? So I think that surveillance and who actually controls our data is always going to be a concern.
And like you said, that is always an issue. Is this something that maybe needs governance from the state or something? How is this kind of going to be regulated?
Well, I mean, at the moment, the state is hell bent on having access to the back doors of software like the Amazon WhatsApp. Same with Apple and their products. So I'm not sure how much I trust. It's that kind of horrible question of how much I trust the state over private entities at the moment, and knowing how obsessed the current UK government's been on snooping and the legislation that we're seeing coming down the track at the moment. I'm a bit cynical.
Thank you very much, John. Karen, again. We're taking a quick break now, but there's more from the local and national papers in a few minutes' time. And welcome back to Press Pit. Each week we look at what's making the news here in Cardiff. So time now to look at our front pages of our local papers today. So starting with the South Wales Echo, we've got the headline, The Real Deal, referring to the City deal, which we'll be discussing later in the show, which sees £1.2 billion being pumped into the Cardiff economy, with hopes of a new transport, new jobs throughout the city. And the South Wales Argus has also gone with the City deal, focusing on the Gwent Council's involvement in the deal. But they've got a sideline on the plans to get the e-cigarette bill banned in the new public health bill that's going through the Assembly at the moment. The Western Mail hasn't gone with the City deal at all, but has chosen to focus solely on the e-cigarette story. So a bit more in depth with this, they're saying e-cigarettes could be banned in public places where children are present. And if a yes vote goes ahead, they're putting it forward as a public health bill. So, John, I know that you've got a bit of breaking news for us on this.
Well, actually, in the last hour, the Assembly voted against the public health bill. Now, this is the last day of the Assembly term, the fourth Assembly that we've had, and this is quite historic, actually. The last day of a government that has actually managed to largely succeed in pushing through its legislative agenda has fallen at the final hurdle. It's a huge, embarrassment for the government, and I'm quite shocked actually that that the bill fell. Teneris Cancer Care was actually opposed to the proposals that were within the bill about banning electronic cigarettes within public spaces. The Welsh Government, to be fair to them, offered up alternative proposals to water it down where there were children present, and then, by the looks of things, from a really flippant comment that the Public Services Minister, Leighton Andrews, made about Plaid Cymru, they withdrew their support and applied a three-line whip. And the legislation's fallen. And I'm still in this kind of complete state of shell shock because it never happens. So this is quite remarkable news today. And what a way to end the end of the fourth Assembly.
And
so,
yeah, I noticed you have an e-cigarette yourself, John, former smoker.
Stitching up.
Yeah, so what's your view on this? Because surely there is no health problems with this, surely. I mean, why ban them in public places?
Well, ideas that the government was putting forward were based largely on the fact that would they renormalise smoking? So does it look like you're using a cigarette or something like that, and does it make tobacco normal again? Now, the research that we've seen carried out so far by Cardiff University and experts in alcohol and tobacco control have not really shown that transfer with young people experimenting with it. So the main position that we were pushing as an organisation was take a step back, let's see the evidence emerge at the moment and not rush it, because we know that a lot of people are benefiting from using electronic cigarettes to quit smoking, and we think any legislation at the moment is just premature. But one of the big things here with this legislation falling is the fact that a load of really good stuff that was put into the bill has now been lost, and that's a major concern for us. So the government have put in proposals for smoke-free spaces, so places like beaches, playgrounds, kind of common sense places where you wouldn't really want people using tobacco. That's now gone.
And Karen, what about you? What's your opinion on this?
Well, I think it's a good thing that this bill has fallen, even if it's not for the reasons that you might expect. I mean, I think that we're talking about a piece of legislation that was not based on evidence, not based on risk assessments. In fact, the evidence demonstrates that e-cigarettes are 95% safer than conventional cigarettes, and that they have, as John was saying, helped a large number of people quit. So on this one, I think that Wales got it wrong. I think on something like the organ donation policy, the Welsh Assembly has really shown a lot of leadership in terms of devolved policy, but this one was wrong, and I think it's a good thing that it got defeated.
And another thing that's faced criticism this week, Prince William has faced a bit of criticism. That's on page 4 of the Daily Mail, which is in front of you there, Karen. This is a bit of a strange one in a way. He's campaigning against anti-hunting and things like that, but then he's saying that although it's terrible, there is a place for it somewhere. I mean, a bit hypocritical?
Well, I think that the Royals definitely need a new spin doctor.
Sorry, if you just pop that one out there for you. So it is a bit of an odd one. He's also a patron of the Tusk Trust as well, which is a bit of a strange one with this. Sorry, Karen.
Oh, sorry. That I think that the Royals need some new advice on publicity. Whenever any of the royals make any kind of political statement, it seems to go horribly wrong. Recently, Prince William was criticized for making comments suggesting that Britain was better off in the European Union, and then the Queen was quoted as saying the opposite, and this all caused huge political rows. So whenever they're in the spotlight, something goes horribly, horribly wrong, and this is another example of it. Some very ill-advised, potentially hypocritical statements on Prince William's part, which indicates that they negotiate this very tricky position as being both public figures, but also figures that have to be very, very careful not to say anything that could be interpreted as being political.
And this is something obviously conservationists have hit out against as well. He's mentioned in another paper that he's keen to get his son involved in wildlife and natural beings and things like that. You know, is this just another thing that we need to criticise the royal family for?
I completely agree with Karen in terms of, you know, they need to sack their spin doctor. I mean, really, you know, avoid the controversial issues. I mean, just stay away from it. You know, if it involves, you know, hunting wildlife, just don't even talk about it. Don't even mention it. It's something that you just keep deep down, and you know, however, you know, much you hold those views, just they're not valued in the public, and it's always going to blow up in your face. The same with the European Union. You stick to coffee mornings and visiting centres and stuff like that, but just don't kind of, you know, strafe into this sort of stuff. It's not helpful.
And his workload's been criticised quite heavily as well in previous papers as well. We've seen, you know, are they really contributing enough? Should the royals be doing more? Karen?
Well, I think this is obviously a very controversial subject, and particularly in Wales, the royals are getting a lot of our tax money, and they're living very comfortably as a result of that. And so, you could say that they should be out there doing a lot more. On the other hand, it does seem to go terribly wrong whenever they make these kinds of statements in public. I think that it's best to go with the advice of doing lots of uncontroversial things and saying very little about politics in public, and very little that could really be perceived as indicating any particular ideology on their part.
And so something a bit lighter now, we've got the sloth versus brioche story, which I believe you've got in the Sun there, haven't you, John?
Amazing.
I mean, we've seen some things like this dotting around. We've got, does a real dog look like Snoop Dogg? Things like this. It's a bit bizarre. So why don't you take the lead on this, Karen? Why are you enjoying this story so much?
Well, I think that this is a very, very important story that both of us really wanted to talk about. It's a story of the ways in which sloths really resemble brioches. And what was interesting for me as well about this story is something that has gone viral on the internet in a very massive way. And that is because it involves a great degree of visuality, and it involves very cute and quite funny animals and breakfast foods that we all like. So what's not to love about this? And we all want to see something that's lighthearted like that. And this kind of story is exactly what is most shareable. Obviously, if we're all sharing this and not sharing stories about the more perhaps weighty issues, that becomes a problem. But this is so irresistible. What's not to love about sloth and brioches?
So you think stories like this really do have a place in our papers, John?
Absolutely, within reason and depending on the paper. And I mean, I won't be like one of the royals and suggest that you should eat sloths either, like you should with a brioche. But it's just a cute story, and we just wanted to bring it to the public's attention. It's amazing.
And I mean, this kind of thing goes viral, doesn't it? Why is it this that strikes a chord with people, do you think? It seems such a basic story.
Well, I mean, if you look at my Twitter feeds, it's mainly pictures of pug dogs dressed up in various states. So yeah, I don't know. It's just it sort of appeals to this kind of weird side of me that's not the political nerd. So yeah.
I mean, I think the research indicates that images that really strike an emotional chord with audiences are likely to be shared, and this is something how can you not think that this is cute? So you have this very positive emotional reaction, it cheers you up, and that is why you share it. And there's a lot of research that goes into what makes particular things go viral and why we share certain things, and somebody, a genius of some sort, has hit a gold mine right here.
And so cute and cuddly is very much the way forward, it
Indeed
seems.
it is.
Okay, thank you very much, guys. Thank you. We're taking a quick break now, but when we come back, we'll take a look at what's making the national and local newspapers. See you shortly. Welcome back to Pressbit. With me are Karen Wall-Jorgensen from Cardiff University and John Antoniazzi from Tenebris Cancer Care. Welcome back. Now, more big news for Cardiff's future as the city deal was signed this week. £1.2 billion will be pumped into Cardiff's economy. The money is pipped for infrastructure and regeneration projects in the city. Our reporter Jeff Collins spoke to the key figures in signing the deal.
This is a really key moment for South Wales and for the whole of Wales, I would say. We spent more than a year negotiating this city deal. It's one of the largest city deals ever been negotiated by UK government, so it's a real once-in-a-generation moment for the whole of Wales to raise economic growth rates right across the South Wales region, with Cardiff city centre at the hub, improving those transport networks, creating the opportunities to move people to where those new jobs and where that new growth will be in the future.
The Chancellor, George Osborne, describing it as a devolution revolution, empowering local areas.
Well, absolutely. In the 21st century, we know that cities will be hubs and engines for job and economic growth creation. We know that if we do it right, if we devolve local powers and get local partners working together, as we're doing with Cardiff Capital Region, that creates a unique opportunity to achieve greater economic growth rates in the future. That's what we hope we're going to see in the next 20 years.
Obviously delighted that we've been able to reach an agreement with both UK and Welsh governments on a substantial investment in infrastructure across the region over the next 20 years. And I think it will help us to accelerate the creation of more jobs and skills and opportunities for the whole region. So it's a great day for us.
And this is something that people of Cardiff and the surrounding areas will see real benefits from in terms of jobs and all kinds of things.
Absolutely, and it isn't just going to be about improvements to public transport across the region. We're very keen to invest in skills and to make sure that we invest in new areas of employment for the region going forward. So I think there are a huge amount of opportunities that will come as a result of this deal, and it is an exciting day for Cardiff and the wider region.
10 local authorities have come together. They've had to iron out some issues to make sure they were as coherent as possible. We've been working with them and of course with the UK government, and this is a day that will see ultimately a lot of money in people's pockets through giving people more skills and easier access to work through the transport system.
And £1.2 billion, just how big a deal, how much of an impact can this have on the South Wales region?
Well, I'll give you an example. The annual budget of the Welsh Government is around about £15 billion a year. This is 1.2 billion. It's over 20 years, mind, rather than a year, but it's 1.2 billion pounds extra that otherwise we wouldn't have. It can make a huge difference to our communities.
So a huge week for Cardiff, which has been months in the planning. Now, John, how much of an impact do you think this city deal will have?
Well, I mean, the investment is really welcome, £1.2 billion, and actually seeing the UK and the Welsh Government work together is quite a big feat, because those are two politically opposed groups of people. What I'm really interested in is actually how they sort the transport network out. We already know that we've got big housing issues in Cardiff. There's a lack of affordable homes. How are they going to connect up communities across South East Wales? And really, is this metro actually going to become a reality? So there's a lot of really kind of big question marks over it, and also how long it'll take for that investment to start impacting on the people of Cardiff. I mean, the metro is going to take a number of years. We've also got electrification of the Great West Main Line coming down, but these projects are all, we're talking 10 years before you actually start to see the benefits to people's pockets. So I mean, for once, I'm not completely cynical. I think that this is going to be, a really positive step, and actually seeing, Cardiff becoming one of these kind of super cities in terms of economic investment and new businesses is really quite exciting, and really what the city deserves.
And I know, Karen, you've got a big thing about transport. You mentioned, obviously, you ride your bike every day. What would you like to see from transport from the city deal?
Well, I think that one of the highlights is what John mentioned here, a new metro system that's going to go all the way to Maesteg, and that is, if it indeed is going to be completed, is going to have a massive impact on communities beyond sort of central parts of Cardiff. And I think for me that's actually really important also in terms of addressing inequalities that have been there for a long time, because what we've seen, particularly since devolution, is that the city of Cardiff has benefited tremendously in terms of the economy and in terms of employment, and other communities outside have remained relatively poor, and these inequalities might to some extent be addressed by these improved transportation links. So at least according to what the politicians are telling us, the idea here is that this is going to benefit these communities, not just in terms of the 1.2 billion government investment, but also in terms of what they anticipate to be something like £4 billion in private investment in those communities. And that once these transportation links are in place, there's going to be better housing, more jobs created in communities in the valleys, and all the way from Maesteg all the way to Abergavenny. And so this is going to be something that's really going to help in terms of connecting all the different communities within the region and actually enhancing the economy. So from that point of view, I think transportation is really, really crucial.
And moving on to a slightly lighter story as well, hitting our headlines. In A New Day, which you've got in front of you there, the crazy granddad, this great granddad who's 75 years old and looking to do 75 marathons in 75 days. Is there a point where you're too old for this kind of thing?
Obviously not. No, I think it's absolutely amazing and a real credit to him that he's as fit as that. I wish I could do that. oh my gosh.
And do you think this is something we should be aiming for, or is there a bit of a health risk here?
Well, I have run all of 3 half marathons in my life,
Wow.
and I consider that one of my major achievements. So I have so much respect for this granddad, and I think that running, however fast or slow you do it, is extremely healthy, and also it requires a lot of perseverance and a lot of psychological strength. And I just want to express my deep felt respect for this granddad, and I really hope that he's going to be able to do that.
And is this something we should be encouraging the elderly to do more, take up more? Are they just worried that they maybe feel like they can't?
Well, I wouldn't suggest running 75 marathons only if you are, a particularly, elite athlete, as obviously this granddad is. But we know, working for a cancer charity, that at whatever point in life, if you can do a little bit of exercise, it makes a huge difference to how you feel every day, and reduces your risk of getting diseases like diabetes and heart disease and cancer. And even if you've got those diseases, people that we're working with people at the moment that have got a diagnosis of cancer, but if they're doing a little bit of exercise, it can really improve their outcomes. Obviously, depending on it's their clinician advises it, but it's fantastic that they can do it. But one of the big things here is how older people are supported by local authorities, and at the moment we're seeing local government in Wales really up against some quite challenging, financial, a really challenging financial situation, and services like those kind of exercise referral schemes and supporting elderly people to exercise more aren't always there.
And how do you think we get people to consider these things? How is it through education, or Karen?
Well, I just want to point to the example of one of the most wonderful institutions in the UK, which is particularly strong here in Cardiff, and that's the weekly free park run, which now has more than 700 runners in one location, Cardiff, and a couple of hundred in another location, completely volunteer powered. And that is something that has really activated a lot of people. I think that what you need to see is a real engagement, both in terms of council and government investment, but also in terms of actually local people and councils making it possible to use public space to encourage exercise. So I think it does need to be a policy priority, because that's what actually gets people out there.
And so is this cost? Is this what's maybe stopping people accessing these services? If it was free, as you mentioned with the park run, would that help?
I think it's mixed, isn't it? And it depends on the community. It's it's so essential to have your community centres and your leisure centres up and running so people can access those facilities. But also, it's organisations like the ones behind Parkrun that kind of empower volunteers to get on and get out. So it's a bit of a mix. You need policy priorities from set from government, which is essential. So things like active travel. So seeing more cycle lanes opening up and making that kind of choice easier, and and also we really need to have that kind of support for volunteers.
And you mentioned active travel. There are several bicycle kind of companies in Cardiff that support people with disabilities and things as well. Is it just a case of expanding those services, Karen?
Well, I think that there also needs to be a case made for actually making sustainable transportation a real political priority. So making it safe to travel on the roads, by walking and by bicycle.
Thank you very much from the both of you there. That's it for Press Pit this week. My thanks to the guests for joining us, and for you at home for watching. Cardiff's local news is next, but from me and your City TV channel. Bye-bye.